Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Game Master 911. Game Master 911, a podcast dedicated to tabletop role playing games. I am your host and game designer, GeoQuester, also known as your girlfriend's boyfriend. And to my left is the Mistress of Darkness, Susie Q. Good evening.
Hi! Welcome back, my little ghouls and ghosties, my little nerds and nerdettes. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Before we get started this evening, we have a competition to announce.
Ha ha! Okay, so by December 22nd, you all need to send us on our Twitter page at GeoQuester on Twitter your holiday photos of your Christmas trees, your Hanukkah thingies, your Kwanzaa whatevers, whatever denomination you are and whatever you celebrate, send them to us. Because we're going to have the contest. Whoever has the coolest one, the most unique, the awesomest, and stuff like that, we're going to give away prizes for them. So send them to us over on Twitter with tagged at GeoQuester. Okay? Thanks, guys.
What we're going to do is on the 22nd, which is our Christmas stream, we are going to choose, Susie and I will choose our top 3 picks. And we'll take our top 3 picks, we'll splash them on the page for all of you to see. And those top 3 picks, you, as the viewers, will be able to vote which of those 3 are the best. So, please be sure to send us your holiday photos to Twitch and tag at GeoQuester in it, right there on your screens, at GeoQuester.
Okay, folks. So we should probably get on with the questions this evening. Dun dun dun. All right. So for question number 1, and this is a patron question. So, alignments. Do they really matter?
It really honestly depends on how you and your group play with alignments.
Hashtag chaotic lives matter.
Yes, hashtag chaotic neutral crazy. Whatever. But in my games, I utilize alignments as a basis for your character's morality, his or her idea that you are going to be focused in a specific set of code of conduct. And if you stray from that code of conduct, you could possibly get some sort of violation. Honestly, most alignments, for the most part, are pretty flexible. Even the lawful alignments are pretty flexible. I think the worst one would be true neutral, to be honest with you, because there is no such thing as true neutrality of any kind. But playing characters of varying alignments in the same game, having good characters and evil characters right next to each other. Thank you, Marcana, for the host, by the way. Having them side by side with each other, that that's not a big deal as long as they're all working towards the same goal. I think that is where people get the goofiness when it comes to alignments. Is how is a chaotic evil fighter supposed to work next to the lawful good ranger and still be a part of the same party? Those are the difficult questions that people think that they need to metagame going, oh, well, you're lawful good and I'm chaotic evil, so we hate each other. No, that does not necessarily mean the same thing. If the goal is in both characters, both have them in their best interests, then those characters can work together even though they have opposing alignments. That's absolutely fine.
I have to agree because so many people think that just because you're playing the quote unquote evil character that you are automatically the bad guy. And that's not always the case, because people tend to forget that one person's bad guy is another person's hero.
In more than one game, I've had lawful good creatures or humanoids as the bad guy. I've used them. Thanks, Ty, for the host, by the way. I've used a number of lawful good creatures and NPCs as the bad guy because, for example, an angel comes into town and sees the entire town as being corrupt, and their morals aren't what it thinks their morals should be, so starts wiping everybody out. A good aligned party fights against a lawful good angel because they're protecting the greater good. At the same time, I've seen lawful evil characters walking down the street and give money to a beggar. The only difference between a lawful evil and a lawful good character is a lawful good character will follow the law and do things for goodness sake, where a lawful evil character follows the law but attempts to bend them in a way where he is most benefited from those laws. There is no real alignment, as it were. I mean, we put it on our character sheets as kind of an afterthought of, I'm chaotic good today. Oh, I'm chaotic neutral, so I'm crazy. I mean, that doesn't really mean that you're crazy if you're chaotic. That just means that you enjoy freedom. The freedom of expression, the freedom of self-reliance. It's about freedom. Where true neutrality, whether it's neutral good, neutral, or neutral evil, neutrality is you walk the line between those two elements. You walk that line where you say, you know what, I've come into this town and it says by law all women need to have prima nocta, the idea of that the lord of the land gets to have the wife on the first night of their marriage to make sure that she was a virgin and he gets to take her virginity. A neutral character, whether they are neutral good, neutral, or neutral evil, would most likely come into that same society, and if they're getting married, would attempt to get married in secret because that law does not uphold what their beliefs are. So alignments, in all sense of the idea of alignment, is the fact that it's just a code of conduct that your character would follow. Speak to your game masters, and game masters speak to your players on what you think your character's code of conduct would be. Come, figure out some hard margins on, okay, my pirate won't kill kids, but I will sink ships. That kind of stuff. Come up with some hard and fast rules where you know where the boundaries are for your character. So if your character steps over those boundaries, then at that point, the game master can step in and say, okay, you've stepped across your moral code, now you're going to have a penalty, or now you're going to have some kind of violation.
Exactly. Okay. Question number 2. If I or a player wanted to analyze the quality of armor, weapon, or gear, what skill checks should I use or require, and what DCs for what quantities of information? This is a really good question because so many times you go into dungeons and you kill stuff or you find treasure chests and stuff like that, and you do pick up random gear.
There's a number of ways to do it. In 5th edition, I'll utilize 5th edition for most of my answers for any of these types of questions. In 5th edition, you could always attune to an object if there's an object to be, if it has an attunement requirement, by spending an hour with it, studying it, playing with it. If it's a potion, you taste it a little bit, that kind of stuff. That's called attunement, and people just pretty much hand wave it. But if you want to actually make it a part of your game where you're doing research into an item and you're attempting to discover things without doing the attunement side, without saying, okay, this is now my item. Some of the things that I've found, specifically, I'm going to say this specifically for magical items because we have a lot of questions about magic items today. Specifically for magic items, you would use your Arcana skill for this, whether you're trained or untrained. If you're proficient or not proficient. You would be able to utilize your Arcana skill. And in the DMG, it already denotes that different types of magic items have different types of rarities. We can use those rarities as a benchmark for your DC levels, whether it is an average, an easy, difficult, etc. So, for example, if you were to go from common, uncommon, rare, very rare, and legendary, there are 5 different categories of magic items, and you were to ascribe a DC to each one of them, we'll say a common magic item would be a DC 10, an uncommon a 15, a rare a 20, 25 for very rare, and then 30 for a legendary. If you were to roll against that on your Arcana check, then you could possibly find out one of the properties of the item that you're using. Like, for example, you're examining a sword and you see on that sword, oh, this sword has, the blade appears to be super sharp. And then it does not ever dull because it doesn't get nicked by this rock that I'm holding. And so that means that, obviously, it has a plus to hit and a plus to damage. So describing these kinds of things and utilizing your character's skills is always good. But once again, if you're going to be a player and you're going to ask this kind of information, be prepared for your game master to say no or to hand wave something to make play faster. You always want to make sure that everybody at the table is getting equal time, so you can't just have one character spending 3 hours identifying every magic item in the party by rolling constant arcana and history checks or nature checks or what skill that the game master provides for it, and telling a piece of lore about every single magic item for every single thing. You just got to make sure to hand wave sometimes. Sometimes you might have a story to tell about this item. But I don't see any issue with using your skills to finding out the basics of an item by using that very simple method.
Okay, Retro Gamer Rye Guy actually brought up a really good question. Do you think the Myers-Briggs indicator test would be useful for character creation? For those of you who don't know what the Myers-Briggs indicator test is, it's a personality test that was developed by Carl Jung and Isabel Myers-Briggs, two very, very well-renowned psychologists. To basically, it divides us into 4 basic personality types: introverts, extroverts, etc., etc. And these can be, these basically kind of sort of fit us into categories.
I'm going to let you go ahead and continue.
Okay, so
While Susie is getting herself prepared for this, let me answer a couple of questions out there real quick. Heliocard, you asked, what if you roll a crit and you still don't get to beat the DC 30 on the legendary? Well, that means that you're going to have to start utilizing other things. I would give my players a bonus to the roll if you went to a library. Like, for example, if it was a good library, I'd give you a +5 bonus to your roll. There's no such thing as a critical success or a critical failure when it comes to a skill. Rolling a 1 is just a 1, rolling a 20 is just a 20. It does not matter in skills. The only time it ever matters is when you're in combat. I'll put a little asterisk by that because we'll talk about that probably a little bit later on. That's what I would do. If just because a character is sitting down with an item and rolls doesn't necessarily mean that they get all the information. They need to sometimes utilize the resources of your game world to help drive the story forward. I mean, imagine that adventure. During downtime, the characters discover thank you, Chris, for the host. The characters discover a magic item, and during downtime, the wizard sits down and he is poring over all of his own knowledge and his own spell books to figure out what this item does. He can't figure it out. So he's got to go to another town or another city. Right there is an adventure hook for your characters, designed by your characters, to move the plot forward, to give them a sense of urgency, to give them the idea that they're in control of their own destinies and not just looking around for the guy with the exclamation point above his head that says, "I have a quest." Doing this kind of stuff with skill checks allows for the game master to add in little side quests, extra plots, little plot hooks that you can follow along as you move up the rank as a character.
Okay, now we're going to go back to Retro Guy's question. Yes, I do think that the Myers-Briggs test would be useful in character creation because it does you can kind of set a path on how your character is going to think, which is what the Myers-Briggs test was originally used for. It was kind of to figure out how people think and how they judge things and how they perceive things. So yeah, technically you could use that as a basis for character creation, and I think that would be a really, really interesting character to create one that way. That would be really, really good. Okay, we have another patron question. Hold on a second here. Okay, other than DM allowing for magical items purchase, what are GP, which are the monies, good for?
Gold pieces are good for so many different things. In your downtime, you have a standard of living that you would like to use. This could, and I'll say could, this could be as far as your character actually healing from a disease or from an infestation or some other such thing by the amount of gold you're willing to spend on your character as a per day, this is my lifestyle kind of thing. You get better rest than somebody who spent less. Or you can use it for training, learning a new skill or picking up a new tool. Those are perfect opportunities to do that. In my games, you can utilize gold for training to possibly get yourself another point in an attribute, depending on amount of time and versus money gold spent. Of course, designing magic items, purchasing spell components, bribing people, making new friends, and influencing enemies. Creating rumors. There's one that people don't really talk about too much. Creating rumors amongst the common folk that help the players in the future. If you're in a small-sized town, we'll say, less than 1,000 people. If you're in a small-sized town, going to the local watering hole establishment and throwing down a couple of gold pieces and whispering in a couple of ears that, hey, such and such a person, he's got the clap. Guess what? That's going to get around, and nobody's going to trust that merchant anymore to go to them for their doctor's needs or what have you, because they really don't. I mean, the rumors are there. Gold pieces are currency, and just like in our common modern everyday life, currency is power. The more you have of it, the more you can use it. I mean, build a stronghold, buy a house, invest in an inn, invest in a store, become a merchant, go buy a book. I mean, there are so many things your characters can do with money other than just go, I need more magic items. That is so mundane. The idea of utilizing just your money for just your everyday adventuring expenses is so mundane compared to the actual plethora of things you can do with gold in any game world.
Oh, the places gold can take you, the things that you can do.
And gold can also, depending if your character has enough of it, gold could make you a target and also further another plot point in the future. So during your downtime, what happens when you got robbed? Or you go to debtor's prison.
Yeah. This is true. Think about that. Yeah, and Shedzar brings up another really good point. You can hire hirelings. Dude, underlings. Yeah, baby, underlings.
I want my whole army of Nodwicks.
Minions.
You just want Dave.
You're right, I do. Okay. What about if you roll a crit, but you still don't beat the 30 DC of a legendary?
I already answered that question while you were looking up your stuff.
Okay. Oh, you already answered that question? Well, crap. Fine then. Okay. My players are currently trapped in a prison, doing forced labor in a gem mine 12 hours a day. Wow, that's a really crappy place to be in, isn't it? Next session is the big breakout. I feel like it should be a fairly epic set piece, but I'm not sure what I'm doing. D&D 5th edition game. Any tips or suggestions? Oh, take it away.
Okay. There are so many different things you can use here, but why don't we
Riot.
go... No.
Riot.
No, not Riot. No. From the Game Master side of things. This is from the Game Master side of things.
Oh, this is from the GM's. I thought it was from the players.
No. You can tell because it says my players.
I call the players in our games my players.
That's because they're scared of you.
They're not scared of me.
All right, so the players that are in there, I'm in that play with Susie. Are you scared of Susie? If you are, just put a yes up there. But anyway, so the idea here is go ahead and utilize stuff from other game systems. I know I am being a bad game master. Oh no, I'm playing a 5th edition game and I'm going to bring in rules from another game. Holy shit, the world's going to end. All right, try out the Pathfinder role-playing game's chase sequence. Now, in a chase sequence, it's a number of cards. Each card has 2 to 4 options on it. The characters are allowed to utilize those options to get from point A to point B in a dramatic sense. However, in this idea, you could utilize those same cards to allow each one of your players, a sense of free agency to move around the board while you still control it and make it controlled chaos. They could break out by, yes, starting a riot, but once the riot starts, what do? They're honestly running away from the guards. It's a chase scene. That's what you're doing. You're doing a chase scene. And you give them options. Each option on each card is allowed a specific DC, a certain speed, a number of rounds that you're there, and you basically go from being a typical role-playing game to almost like a board game, where you're trying to beat the clock to get to the end. You utilize the options on each one of the quote-unquote squares to move those characters forward or to hinder them. And those people who are chasing them also need to follow those same rules. I've done this in my Return of the Wraithborn game. I did it twice, actually. In Spurl, who is Rob Tui's character, in his Session 0, he had a chase scene where he was chasing after a person that had a MacGuffin. And then later on, the characters, after they'd been together for a while, were chasing down a murderer through the streets of Strathmore, which is one of the capital cities in my game world. They used this chase sequence idea from Pathfinder in 5th edition. They had DCs for different things to overcome. For example, a villain ran through and slapped a horse, making the horse rear back. Okay, do we stop long enough to make the horse calm down? Or do we try to run around the horse and go through the crowd instead? Do we go over the barrels that the NPC threw down in front of us, or do we try to do a basic climb over them? Do we go through the hole that's in the wall? Do we go over the portcullis? You know, all these kinds of very basic options. Keep the flow moving. Make these players make choices. Some of the players will choose one thing. Others, please, some will do the most difficult things all the time because their dice look at the most difficult DC on the board and say, I will only work for that. Now, at the same time, there was also a number of things that they you know, suffered from, like points of exhaustion if they failed a specific role, or amount of time wasted in that square, which allowed the villain to get away, or in this case, allow the guards to get closer. If they were to meet each other, say the guards and the PCs meet each other, sure, there could be a battle, but the PCs are probably not going to have any equipment. They're going to probably want to run away as quickly as possible. So what it's going to be is shove the guards away and then continue down the track. It's a great way to combine a combat encounter with a chase encounter, with a number of other types of encounters where they're utilizing their skills. And it's a great opportunity to tell a good story, high action. I would highly recommend that if you're doing this face to face, that you play some kind of music that has a high beat to it. Play it low in the background. It gets the players focused, it gets their hearts racing, and they understand that there's a sense of urgency in everything that they're going to be doing. So I would recommend take a look at the Pathfinder game, take a look at some of the videos that you can find online about chase sequences in Pathfinder utilizing the cards, and use that as your escape attempt.
Oh, yeah. All right. Do intelligent items have to have a will of their own? How would an intelligent item go about asserting its will on the character? Would an intelligent item be able to gain XP and levels?
Okay. Like all intelligent creatures, all sentient, creatures that are out there, they all have a willpower of their own. They all have their own sense of agency, their own free will. Why would anybody include an item, whether it's a weapon, an armor, an amulet, a ring, you name it, why would it be included as intelligent, even a basic intelligence, without having a willpower? Let's use the One Ring of Power from Lord of the Rings. It could not speak. It could not think of its own. It was an extension of a supernatural force who had willpower, and it exerted its willpower over the person who wore it. So whether that was Smeagol, who became Gollum, or it was a hobbit, or an elf, or a dwarf, or anybody else who saw it, they all had this willpower forced down upon them, and eventually these people would be worn down to such a point where they would become that item's slave. Now, what happens when that item does exert its will? What kind of rules do you want to do with that? If you want to do, for example, a wisdom saving throw versus a wisdom check, or maybe even a charisma saving throw, because that's a dump stat, why don't we go ahead and use a charisma saving throw, because it'd be a social kind of aspect. Give that intelligent item some kind of stats, some skills, some reason why it's an intelligent item other than the fact that I have a +1 sword and it likes to make jokes. Okay, that's great, but what happens when that +1 magical sword is making a joke and you're trying to sneak up on those orcs in that camp? Exerting wills from the character to the item and from the item back to the character, try to utilize and increase that sense of drama, that sense of my character and my item may be at odds with each other even though they have the same purpose. Now, should they be able to gain experience points and levels? No, they're not a character or an NPC. If they had abilities that they were going to be gaining, for example, as the quote-unquote the item leveled, then possibly, yeah, you may want to do that. But if you're going to give that item experience points, then it's coming from the player character's pool of experience points that they're all getting. So it'd be like getting another person in there. So just be careful.
Okay. We have another question here. What is your favorite campaign, either GM'd or played?
That's really subjective. Okay. My favorite campaign that I have ever played or run in. I would have to say my very favorite would be called Origins of Magic, which was a Forgotten Realms campaign that I ran 20 some odd years ago. It was before I ever met Susie. I ran it for 2.5, almost 3 years, with a total of 16 players. They traveled across the Forgotten Realms. They delved deep into Undermountain. They went to Myth Draenor. Matter of fact, the Storm King's Thunder module that is out from Wizards of the Coast. That one actually takes place very close to where those player characters were. The player characters were in Triel. That would have to be one of my favorite campaigns of all time that I've ever run. As a player, I think my favorite one was playtesting the second edition Code of the Harpers book, the handbook. I did that back in 1993. The game master's name was Dave Vaught, or Tip Vaught, your choice, who went on from game design to being the head of the RPGA network for TSR before they sold out to Wizards.
Okay, we have another question. This comes from FSH Schmo.
You can just call him Chris.
Oh, this comes from Chris. What is the Great Game Master's thoughts on the Adventures in Middle-earth Player's Guide?
I have not gotten to see it yet.
There you go. Oh, yeah, we haven't. I've heard really good things about it, though. But I've also heard some really bad things about it, so I don't know. What do our... Send us your... To all our fans out there, send us your thoughts on the Middle-earth Player's Guide. What do you guys think about it? If you've read it, let us know.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, next question. I've never played before. The game I'm joining in has a lot of really experienced players. I'm really nervous because it looks like fun, and I've always wanted to try out role-playing. What suggestions do you have for someone like me so I don't cock this up?
Have fun. There's no such thing as playing D&D or any role-playing game for that matter wrong. And if somebody tells you at your table that you're playing wrong, you tell them to fuck off.
Yeah, tell them bite you because...
No, not bite you. Tell them to fuck off. Because if you're having fun, you're role-playing right. The whole idea behind a game is to have fun. It is not to sit there and try to say, oh no, I didn't realize Magic Missile had 2 missiles. Oh no, I rolled a D6 instead of a D4. Tell them to fuck the hell off. Because if they want a rules lawyer, go get in a goddamn court someplace and do it there. Because at a gaming table, it is time to have fun. You let your hair down. For God's sake, there are memes out there of ogres looking for Mountain Dew and Cheetos and want to fuck girls in a bar. Anybody? Summoner geeks, anybody? Please, by all means, if you're a brand new player, I love brand new players because you haven't been ruined by the bullshit that happens at a table. Tell these people to fuck off. Now, if you're a female and you have a bunch of male players who are telling you that this is the wrong way, no, you should do this instead, take out a tit, slap them in the face, and tell them to fuck off before you make them eat their own testicles. Because male players will do this to female players on a regular basis. It's the only time these geeks have an opportunity to see a girl for the most part, and they will always attempt to dominate you at the table. Do not allow them to dominate you at the table. You women are actually terrifying to most of those geeks in those basements. Please, by all means, go out of your way. Be boisterous. Fake it till you make it.
And speaking from A, a female gamer, and B, someone who was a new gamer at one point in time, and my gaming tables were dominated by males, yeah, faking it till you make it works. And I'm sorry, yeah, if you need to whip out a tit and smack them in the face with it, by all means, do so. They shut up real quick. Okay, next question. Okay, this is for both of us. What are your favorite characters that you have ever played?
Mine would be Raxius Leaflord, who was the character that I played in the playtest of Code of the Harpers. Um, I utilized him for years. One of my favorite parts of that character was he started off life as a ranger in second edition, and he was illiterate. I actually purchased the ability not to read. And when it came to the time to be at the end of Code of the Harpers, and we were getting our mentors at the time, the Ed Greenwood came into the table that day to help award all the players for, I think we had played for almost 4 months straight. Um, he came in as Elminster, waking up on the couch nearby as everybody else is getting all of their stuff, and my character didn't get anything, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, you never made it! You never made it!" They're whispering me stuff. They're like, oh my God," because we played this on Delphi, which was the original TSR bulletin board system. We used to have to dial into those things, and Ed Greenwood was sitting there, and he woke his character of Elminster up and said, "This boy here needs to learn to read." And I went off to learn how to become a wizard at that point. And it was honestly, that character will forever be with me. I mean, I was 18, 19 years old at the time. I'm 42 now. I can remember the fear that I had, and when nobody spoke for me as one of the Harpers to have me join. I remember, going through and having the GM's wife whisper me, going, "Oh my God, what the hell's going on?" Which, by the way, her name was Deb Vaught, amazing cleric, and it was a lot of fun, and I had so much fun just playing those that character and with those players that I will never forget that. That is my very favorite 100% of all time.
Um, wow. Honestly, there over the years there's been so many good characters. Hmm. I honestly have to say I think the one I've had the most fun with was probably Maxine, the antiseptic paladin. she got, dude, she had a charisma of 8. She could only heal 1 hit point with her lay on hands. So basically, she was a Tylenol, and that was it. And the only way she could hit anything was if she tucked her head and charged it first. So as she got into higher levels, we ended up getting her one of the rhino helm of charging or something like that. And even even then, it was still like the only way she could hit anything. She would have to charge it first and then roll to hit. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that character too. Okay, next question. I'm a little worried we're burning through all my story really quickly. I'd like the campaign to last a fair while, and it feels like we're just tearing through chunks of the story. This isn't exactly a bad thing, and everyone is really enjoying it, but I'm just wondering, are there ways to slow the sessions down just a little bit?
If your players are tearing through a lot of your content, both physical and social content, that means that your encounter design is a little too weak. It's a little too lax. It's okay to have a number of very easy encounters, all the way up to medium type encounters for long spans of time. But make sure to throw in a couple of hard encounters every once in a while, or revisit what kind of items and what kind of equipment those characters might have. They may be having gear that might be giving them too much power. In that case, you're beginning to fall into the category of a Monty Hall campaign, where it's what's behind door number 1. Oh, look, you get all the magic weapons. We don't want to do that kind of stuff. So revisit your encounter design. If you typically throw 4 goblins against 5 PCs at first level, you may want to increase that to being 6 goblins against those same PCs.
Yeah, I think that's more of a balancing thing. Look at if your party's burning through your storyline really quickly, you kind of want to look at a you want to kind of start looking at the CR. Well, it used to be CR. I don't know what it is now for 5th edition because I haven't DM'd anything, but you kind of want to look at the CR of some of the creatures. They may be too easy for your people.
And I agree with Shadzar in chat. Yes, side quests are another great way of being able to provide additional content for your players. But as a game master, if you've already plotted everything out for your players, then you're worried about your pacing is what you're doing. There is ways of throwing in speed bumps. Side quests are a good speed bump. Adjusting your encounter balance is a good speed bump. Revisiting them, this kind of goes both hand in hand with encounters and side quests. Have one of the encounters that you have, whether it's a random encounter, quote unquote, because there's no such thing as a random encounter on a table. I'll get into that in a second. But having these things work together, have a side quest and a balanced encounter work together, add a rogue that steals one of those Monty Hall items that you realize, oh shit, this item here is what's really making all the difference. Why not steal it? I mean, the players, they steal from NPCs all the time. Why doesn't an NPC go ahead and steal it from the player? It's not that far-fetched, and it gives the characters a reason to go on a side quest. It's like, oh, I got to get my magic weapon back because that thief over there took it and ran off into the woods with it. So
exactly, but just keep in mind that if you're a new DM or you're an inexperienced GM, that sometimes having to do a side quest like off the fly can kind of throw off your groove just a little bit. Okay. As a DM, for both of you, in my game, I have a random encounter table. I have random encounter tables to spiff up the traveling part of the game. Someone rolled and got that they found magic armor. I had them roll a few times on the table to determine what effects and if it should be cursed or not, and so on. The problem is I did that in the middle of the game, and people complained about the time it took, 15 to 20 minutes. After that, when I gave the focus back on the after that, when I gave the focus on the ones that complained, they barely paid attention. Is that my fault as the DM, or is that the player's fault, or is that both of us? All right. First of all,
wait, before you do that, before we get into this one, Susie, read number 7.
All right. While I was DMing, some of the players were getting frustrated with the time it took to get the stats for the enemy NPCs. Having to look at the monster manual for the stats of different creatures takes too long, which I'm fine with, but I don't want to lose some of my group members because of my speed. Are there any tips to increase this process, or is it just an aspect of D&D that can't be helped? Okay.
See, this was what was great, was the fact that I believe that one came from Heliocard. Is that right?
Yes, that one came from Heliocard.
Thank you, Hel. Which happened to be also a question that was already on our list, except you're using the magic items, and this other person was asking about creatures. And it refers back to my last question that I answered about the fact that there's no such thing as a random encounter. GMs, especially if we're playing online, even though we have a lot of automated systems for us nowadays, you never want to have a random encounter. Your encounters are never random. You always have a bunch of them banked, ready to go at any moment's notice, because the players do not want to sit there and wait for you to place out the creatures, find the magic items, to do all the rest of those kinds of things. In this hurry up, get it done world, we can't just sit there and roll endlessly on tables. We need to get into our game as fast as possible. And since so many people have so much technology around them, especially for us who game online, this can be a big detriment to us, because if we lose our party because we're going, all right, hold on a second, I got to find this, and it takes us 5-10 minutes to find all the information we're looking for, it really loses the story. For those of us who stream, it loses our audience. And to be honest, it ruins the fun and breaks the immersion of what's going on. So having a couple of encounters banked, whether it is you make 2 encounters or 3 encounters of every possible thing that is on your table, or you shorten your tables down so you only have a few things, or you quote unquote have a random encounter, which is actually a planned encounter when you go, oh look, the dice said random encounter, here it is. No, it's not. It's a planned encounter. You planned this 6 months ago that you're going to have an encounter at this piece of road at this point in time. There is no such thing as random happenstance when it comes to a game master. You need to look into everything. You need to prepare your games. That's the difference between having an average, everyday D&D game and a game session where the characters and the players keep coming back over and over again. They bug you over Facebook. They bug you over text messages. They call you. They get on a Discord channel and they constantly talk to you about it. Those are the differences between having that average game and the great game, is the fact that the players have this sense of urgency. They have this sense of fun. Everything is right there at their fingertips at all times. You have answers, you have encounters, you just know what's going on, and they see this magic happen before their face. And that is what draws people in to play these games. And in our world, unfortunately, of video games where everything is at their fingertips and has so much out there that's all multimedia thrown in your face at all times, tabletop, we move at the speed of the game master. Some of us are faster, some of us are slower. That determines your pace of your game. You don't want to be screwed out of a really good story that you've spent a lot of time building just because a die roll told you to roll on 17 other tables.
And Alucard actually has a bit of a counter argument to that. He doesn't roll on that table that often, but he based it on a survival roll for when they travel, DC being set if they ever traveled there before, walking on a road, and so on and so on.
Say that one again, I was adjusting.
Sorry. Alucard had a bit of a counter argument for that. He said he doesn't roll on it that often, but he based it on a survival roll for when they travel, the DC being set for if they ever traveled there before, walking on a road, and so on and so forth.
Which I understand, and if you're going to allow that kind of idea, then you need to be prepared for it. I'm not saying that rolling on tables is a bad thing. Matter of fact, there is sometimes where rolling on a table, like Rob has some really funny as hell critical tables that will fuck a party 6 ways to Tuesday, and they are funny as hell to watch. But at the same time, if you're going to be rolling on a table, make sure that you have any possible outcome. You've either planned it ahead of time, or you have some sort of contingency if it does pop up. Anytime something is going to happen, you have to be omniscient enough to say, if I'm going to allow this to happen, this is what one of the 4 results could be. And you have to plan for each of those 4 results.
But I do have to say that once he got done with the player that got the item, the other players should not have been dicks and should have been paying attention. They shouldn't have, done the cold shoulder bit and because that was just a bunch of petty bullshit.
Yeah, right that's a dick move. And players do this to game masters all the time. Players think that the game master works for them. Game masters, we don't work for the players. We're not there to entertain them. That is not our job. Our job is to tell our story. Those players are characters in that story that help shape how the story is. It becomes a shared experience. You're there to have as much fun as everybody else, and if it becomes a job for you, then you're not having fun anymore. If you need to sit down and spend weeks and months of preparation just to say, okay, if they roll a 2 on this die roll, then I have to have this 6 things done. If they roll a 3, then this 6 and 4, etc., 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 then that's not fun anymore. Where's the fun for the game master? There is none. I find my most fun is while I'm watching my players, and I root for my players, I help my players, I like to. I find my most fun as a game master when the unexpected occurs and they come up with the craziest weird shit to go ahead and pile on top of it. And while they're piling their weird shit on top of me, I'm figuring out what's coming next. I try to react to them as much as I possibly can by having things prepared. I don't see it as a job, and I don't want my players to go, well, you didn't have the monster stats ready. I'm not going to pay any attention to you now because you didn't have the monster stats, or in this case, armor's stats ready to go. Fuck off.
Yeah, I know there are GMs out there who, if you do that to them, they'll make sure you never get a freaking magic item ever. Yeah. You'll be the butt nut in the party who's wearing the mundane shit.
Yes, that player can go ahead and go join the rules lawyer player in the courtroom. That one can go be a jury member.
Okay, next question. I am designing an encounter for a skilled group of level 1s. What I'm trying to do is set up a villain that the party would have to fight later. Thus, this encounter is supposed to be a forced loss. My question is, what level should I create this villain at so that he looks beatable, but even with the player's skill, he's not, and a wipe would be guaranteed?
I'm going to quote a famous baseball movie. If you build it, they will come. If you stat it, they will try to kill it. That is the way players work. If there is stats on a creature, they will attempt to kill it, and they will kill themselves in the process no matter how difficult. And guess what? You're the asshole for being the one who has put it in front of them because you're the one who made it. Why do I have an encounter? Blah, 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 blah. Big NPCs, as I've told my son when we talked about this, because he had recently had a encounter against a legendary type creature that was meant to have the players run away. Players forget running away is an option. They need to have hints. They need to have foreshadowing. It's part of the storytelling aspect of it. That if you're going to put a warrior on the road, you don't dress him in plain clothing and give him a kick-ass sword, because the players see that as an opportunity to murder Hobo, the bad guy, and take his kick-ass sword, because they think that's the MacGuffin. Where the MacGuffin is actually, this is the campaign villain, he's standing in front of you, he's ready to face you down. Well, if you're going to have experienced players face down the final boss at a very early stage to build up animosity between the two groups, instead of facing the actual boss, quote unquote, himself, have the party face a difficult set of minions. Because the boss isn't going to travel by himself. Come on, there's 6 good guys coming at him, or 4 good guys coming at him. Well, he wouldn't be standing in the middle of the road by himself kicking all their asses, even though he probably could kick all of their asses. It would be one of those moments of, these people are not worth my time, as he walks away. You know, minions do my dirty work, as he walks away. It still sets up that animosity. It still sets the precedence that this villain NPC is going to be the one who is going to be chasing down the players throughout the rest of the game. Or the players are going to be chasing him down throughout the rest of the game, trying to thwart him. You know, allowing the NPC to get away by utilizing minions is perfectly fine. Whether it's waves upon waves of 1 hit point goblins, or 3 or 4, you know, relatively difficult NPCs that the players get to fight and possibly get some items out of. Either way we go at it, as long as that story is conveyed in the encounter, because that's more of a role-play encounter than it is a combat encounter. Sure, there's combat involved, but it's a social encounter. This is to set expositional story elements into your game that you're going to build on in the future. And this is a great opportunity to show the players that no fucks are given by the villain for the PCs, which should piss them off enough to go chase after him as often as they can.
Exactly. And as PCs, come on, guys. Once you know that if we see an NPC that we can't kill and we can't stabby or slashy or bashy it for some unknown reason because a GM wants to screw with us, then we are going to chase that little bastard to the ends of the earth until it gets to the point where we can kill him.
My favorite villain, well, before anybody asks this question, my favorite villain that I've ever created was actually a sock puppet. And it was for a D&D game. I made this one, and he just sang. He had no words that came out of his mouth. He just went buzza 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 buzza. That's all he did. And he was a sock puppet. He was an evil sock puppet. He was my favorite villain of all time. He wasn't even a major villain. He was a minor. He was an animated object by a bard that just was there to annoy the fuck out of the party. And every time they heard that sound, the entire party would go bonkers because they knew something bad was about to happen. Every single time. All right, now I've got a question from our stream for Susie Q.
All right, hit me.
What is a good table size physically for a party of 4 players and 1 game master? So we're talking face-to-face role-playing now.
Okay, so honestly, this isn't really that difficult. If you're looking, you're looking for basically a table that's going to be large enough to sit about 5 people. Now, technically, you can use a standard size dining room table. You know, the ones that have that seat 6. You may want to go with one that seats 8, though, just because players, especially when you're playing face to face, usually players have a lot of crap with them. You have your notebooks, and you have your books, and you have your dice, and you have your dice trays, and all this other stuff. Or you can quash the whole table idea, and you can just play in your living room on the sofas and chairs, or if you have a finished basement, you can just play down in the finished basement on your sofas and chairs and stuff like that. But if you prefer to play at a table, you're probably going to want one that seats about, especially for 5 people, you're probably going to want one that seats about 8 or so, only because you're going to want that extra room. Okay, and for our last question for the night, and I'm only going to touch on this very, very shortly. And that's only because we already touched on this in game in 911 number 3. And this is regarding the whole topic of the homophobia, the race, the gender bender issue, the whole 9 yards. And the question that was posed to us is, what if the person playing the homosexual, the race, whatever, is the offender in the whole bullying issue? I've known a few people who are socially okay with the subject, but when it comes to someone hitting on them, it is a trigger. It can be very hard one to navigate without either being unfair to the victim or being a dick to the guy who is usually the victim but is the aggressor this time. Okay, first of all, I don't care if you're straight, if you're bi, if you are a pink unicorn with purple fucking polka dots. If you are hitting on someone, if you are making someone uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, and like I said, I don't give a shit what your sexual orientation is, your race, your creed, your color, your religion, anything like that.
Let me put a little caveat in there. If you're doing it on purpose.
Yes, if you're doing it on purpose to make a person uncomfortable, which qualifies as bullying, I don't care And they've asked you to stop, and they've mentioned that they are uncomfortable, I'm sorry, I don't care. I have no qualms about kicking you from my game. I have no qualms about removing you from my house, from my life, from anything. You have, it doesn't matter who you are or what your beliefs or anything like that are. You have no right to make anyone else feel uncomfortable for any reason, especially when they are there to have just as much fun as you are. And if they can sit there and accept you for you, you should be able to accept them for them and not have to sit there and make them feel uncomfortable and bully them and hit on them and stuff like that. It's not fair to them.
That's very, very true. I also have to agree with some of the chat right now. D&D is meant for sharing in a fantasy experience, and that means different things to different people. And for the most part, it means fighting monsters, taking their shit, and going on and being heroes. That is what it means. In today's society, with the fact that we have all these fucking weirdos out there who want to go into opposite sex bathrooms and all the rest of this bullshit, and I identify as fill in the blank. I could give a rat's ass about that, but keep it out of my game. There is a point where my fantasy games and the reality of life need to separate, and that is one of those points. Please do not ever, ever bring that bullshit into my games thinking that there is going to be something good about it. Now, if you're hitting on an NPC, be sure to discuss it with your game master. Say, hey, look, I have a character who is homosexual, or I have a character that has an extreme prejudice towards elves, or I have a character that decides that they just don't like women for some reason, and I would like to roleplay it that way. Well, that's absolutely fine. I have no issue with that if that's a part of the character's makeup. But if it's going to make other players at my table uncomfortable, I will sit down and I will discuss it. Hey, look, you got to back off a little bit. It is making people uncomfortable. I'm the one as the game master, and I've done this throughout my entire life, whether it's at my actual day job where I wear a shirt and tie, or I'm wearing a hard hat, or I'm sitting down and writing a book. I have to have these conversations with people all the time. There are times where your reality needs to stay out of our fantasy. And if the only way you can play is by bringing that reality into fantasy, then you need to stop playing. I'm sorry. You are not mature enough to play in my games.
Exactly. All right, folks, that is our time for tonight. I know, Retro, you had another question, but we're going to table that for next week. Guys, I'm going to be setting up a Twitter account for you guys to send all of your questions to. I haven't set it up just yet. As soon as I set it up, I will be sure to, if you're a member of our Discord page, I'll be sure to post it to the Discord page as soon as I have it set up. All right, and that's our time for tonight, guys. Thank you. You all have been great, and we couldn't do this without you, so thank you all so very, very much. And good night.
Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next time. Be sure to tweet me those pictures.